Hey everybody, welcome to Recovery TV Live, promptly at 9:30. We are running a little late this morning, but we're glad to have you. We are going to talk about disclosing secrets as part of betrayal trauma recovery, so don't go anywhere. Welcome to Recovery TV Live. So we're going to talk about disclosing secrets today, but before we do that, just want to kind of cover some housekeeping things. Just the typical things that we go over on every one of these episodes, that this Facebook Live is not a public forum, so if you want your privacy to be protected, we want you to engage with us, but if you want to keep it private, then you need to go ahead and email us at therapy@familysolutions.ok.com, or it should be showing on your screen. And we have someone standing by to receive those, but if we don't get to them in this episode, maybe we'll be able to address them in future episodes. Just also want to remind everybody too, if you're watching this on YouTube or the rebroadcast, just please go ahead and subscribe to our channel and ring the notification bell so you will be notified when more YouTube videos like this are posted. And I think that's about it.
The housekeeping.
All right. So we're going to talk about disclosing secrets, but just in case you're watching this, you don't know who we are. I'm Josh Nichols. This is my colleague and business partner, Carrie Kiger, and we have a clinic here in Oklahoma City called Family Solutions Counseling, and we primarily specialize in betrayal trauma treatment,
Right.
which includes like infidelity, sex addiction, things like that, and we do a lot of couple recovery as part of that process.
Right. And obviously hearing our Josh describe our work, you can understand why we would need to be talking about disclosing secrets.
Right. And so that's one of the reasons why people come in.
Right.
And so by the time people get to us, usually there's been one disclosure already, and so that's why they came in, because the infidelity or the act of betrayal was discovered by the partner, and as you can imagine, or some of you might know, it's very devastating. It upturns their world, and their world goes from at one moment being safe or at least understood,
Familiar.
Yeah, familiar, and to very unfamiliar and unsafe and uncertain. So they come in often in crisis, and then we kind of, help them navigate through that.
Right. And the nature of the secrets, how they were discovered, and the content of what was discovered, both of those impact basically how far-reaching the impacts of the upturn of the world go for our clients. And most of the time, clients are coming in because they have stumbled upon some kind of secret. Sometimes a partner comes to the other and says, I have to tell you something.
Right.
But most of the time, in our experience, it's something that people discover or they're forced into that awareness.
Right.
And so, again, it's not of one's choosing, which also increases the intensity of the crisis event.
Right. So I think one thing to be worth talking about to start off with is really kind of clarifying what is a secret. Because I think all of us have things that we just keep inside of our minds. We don't go home and feel like it, or feel the need to, or feel like that it's expected of us to disclose every single thought that jumped into our mind.
Right.
And then if there are some things that are troubling to us, we will kind of go through a process that most of us are just unfamiliar with. It's kind of just happening subconsciously, of deciding, am I going to kind of deal with this on my own, or am I going to, bring in somebody to help, or a sounding board or something like that.
Sure.
And I don't think anybody would consider that a secret. Like,
Right.
If, for example, my wife or your husband were to say, hey, I've been having this problem for about a week or two, and I just can't figure it out. And then, it's unlikely that we'd be offended and like, why haven't you told me about this in the last 2 weeks? But that'd also be based on what it was.
Sure, the content matters.
Right.
Sure. But I think what you're talking about is the difference between privacy and secrecy.
Exactly.
Right? And privacy is something that is important to everybody, right?
Exactly.
To have your own private thoughts, to have your own private time, to have your own private space. It's a skill of childhood to learn to not say everything that comes into your head.
Right, right.
That's privacy, and that is really healthy in a psychological sense because you get to have your own world.
Right.
And deciding to partner up with somebody does not mean you abandon all your privacy.
Yeah.
That actually is unhealthy. But secrets are things, just to abbreviate it, secrets are things that can make you sick, right? That's how we say it in therapy a lot,
Yeah.
right? Secrets are things that are damaging, are unfair, that tilt the scales. I always tell my clients that we all have a right to know what's going on in our world and when we've hitched our wagon to somebody else, and that's what kind of defines a secret.
Yes, exactly. When you were talking about privacy, I was thinking that, my wife, we've been married for over 20 years, and she has a stack of diaries that she's written in, and she doesn't hide them from me. She doesn't lock them. I do believe she expects me not to read them.
Yes.
And I haven't, in 20 years, haven't even opened one of them, because those are private thoughts. Like, I don't consider what she's writing in her diaries or her request for me not to read them as being secretive.
Right.
It's like we all need our own personal space in that sense. And then you're right, about secrets create sickness. They usually are things that the other partner would know that the other person would want to know about, or it would they know the partner would be hurt or offended by it.
Or impacted.
Yeah.
Right.
You're right. And so the reality is that most people, I'm not going to say all, but most people are keeping secrets because of that reality.
That's right.
Is they know it's hurtful information.
Right. And most of the time people keep secrets because they're entrenched in the belief that it's protecting someone they care about.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
And I think this is where you enter real gray territory, right? Around protection versus giving people information that helps them make life choices.
Right.
And so it's not a set standard. And I would say that when we're working with clients, we are talking about kind of the threshold between secrets and privacy.
Right.
Right.
Right. Now, this is where it gets complicated, though, because I think everybody probably watching this understands logically that all that makes sense. But when you've experienced infidelity or some form of a betrayal trauma through, like, infidelity, financial infidelity, sex addiction, and that information comes to the surface, now people can't tell what's a secret and what's not. So now, like, the information that is typically information that most people would just decide to keep to themselves, or they might decide to keep to themselves, might decide to disclose, it's neither here nor there, to the person who's been betrayed, that can feel like more secrets,
Right.
basically. Like what we would say would be privacy might
Right.
feel like more
Like
secrets
secrets.
to them, right? And that's part of the process on this.
It is. Because I think, again, like Josh said about discovering a betrayal upends your world. And so even concepts that you used to think, oh, I know the difference between privacy and secrecy, now you're having to reevaluate, redefine. And I would even say move fence posts often around
Right.
where those thresholds are.
Right, exactly. So often, like, what happens in a couple when a secret is disclosed or a secret is discovered, usually we actually call it a discovery versus a disclosure.
Right.
So when it's discovered and the world gets upended, I kind of look at it like a house of cards. So it's usually like the thing that I thought would never happen, this person would never do such a thing, or this would never happen to me or us, it happened. And your whole infrastructure collapses at that point, like a house of cards. And so it's not just feeling unsafe in that relationship. Most partners feel unsafe in the world they're in.
Right.
Because they're questioning everything at
They
that
had
point.
built the foundation of that home around trust in their relationship,
Right.
and now it's gone, and so everything gets revisited. And that's why people are coming in a crisis state.
Right.
Because it's not an isolated issue that I need some help tying this up. It's everything feels undone to them. And I'm glad you said discover versus disclosure,
Right.
because like I said at the beginning, how we discover these things impacts also the severity
Right.
of the wounds.
Oh yeah, exactly. And when a partner comes in that state, or a couple comes in that state, the partner wants to know everything.
Yes.
Right. And so and that can be a little overwhelming to the person who is the unfaithful partner in the situation, but that person really needs to remember that what is feeling overwhelming to you, this person is feeling all the time, because everything, they're questioning everything. They're looking back on all these memories
Right.
in the past,
Right.
even sometimes beyond the relationship.
Right.
Of, was this real? What was going on at this point in time, or that point in time, or was the love that we had for each other even
Right.
real love? It's all being questioned, and they're feeling very overwhelmed by that. And it makes sense to me that the brain is going to want to help this person
Right.
feel safe again. So it wants all the information. It doesn't want to be
No more surprises.
broadsided. So that's a good way to say it. It's like it does not want to be surprised
Fool me once
anymore.
kind of thing.
Exactly.
And what that looks like can look a little bit like obsessive data mining behavior, right? All
Yeah.
the phone records, reading all the text, verifying all the locations, calling people, asking people. It's this attempt to gather data to try and understand, to put pieces together for an understanding of what maybe has really been happening, but also to create a safety plan around it. It doesn't feel like seeking safety behaviors,
Right.
but that is the function of it in the brain.
Right, exactly. And so a lot of times in the beginning, there's this demand for all this information, right? And more often than not, I would say the person who has committed the unfaithful act feels terribly sorry about it and very remorseful, and they're very willing to do whatever it takes to help with healing. And so they just start answering all the questions. Right? Go ahead.
Well, they're answering all the questions. In that moment of panic, they want to relieve the crisis emotions, and so they're telling whatever their partner is asking. They're telling, right? And that their heart's in the right place.
No question. Yes, exactly.
Right. But what we find often by the time they get to us is that now we've maybe had an abundance of information that neither one of them knows how to process.
Exactly. And sometimes, again, I'd even say this is more often than not too, is that this thing happens that we call staggered disclosure.
Right.
And so as in a moment of remorse and guilt, the unfaithful partner's disclosing, they're still withholding because they're trying to disclose enough to maybe appease the partner, but still holding back information because it's hurtful information. So maybe there's been multiple affairs, but they just disclosed one, but in hoping that'll appease the honesty criteria, and put this person's mind at ease, and because boy, I don't want to tell them there's been two.
Right.
I've already wrecked their world, and the reality is most of the time they don't want to lose them.
Right. They don't want to lose them. So it's a combination of not wanting to lose and wanting to protect. Right. But the staggered disclosure, and obviously we're working with clients in real time, but even the data really points out how absolutely devastating and traumatic that is.
Right.
To live through one disclosure and then another and then another.
Right.
And for some people, it's many, many, many events of staggered disclosure.
Yeah, and the partner is already wondering, was any of this real?
Right,
And with ever new disclosure, more information comes out. It's just validating their sense of unsafety in this relationship, and so it's a lot more harmful than helpful.
It sure is.
Right. So what we typically do, obviously we can't get that information to people until they come to us, unless they've watched one of these videos or something. But what we really encourage people to do is for the partners to start writing down their questions,
Right.
and do everything that they can to not ask them, which is very hard.
It's very hard, and to some degree, it's somewhat impossible, and we understand that. We're not asking people to all of a sudden become robots,
Right.
but
Exactly.
what we know is that down the road, being able to manage this in the ways we're going to talk about, it really does help you recover down the road. And so
Right.
what feels in that moment like I've got to know the answer today, holding back and evaluating what you want to know, and then we'll talk about how maybe to do that with our help. It really does help the healing process.
Right. Yes, exactly. And we also encourage the unfaithful partner to not answer the questions if they can, which is also very difficult. And there are ways that we kind of help them to do that by having some certain phrases kind of in their repertoire, like this sounds kind of like one of those questions that Josh and Carrie told us about. Can we at least get an appointment with them before we go down this road and I start answering questions like this, because I'm not sure if this is going to be considered staggered disclosure or not. And a lot of times, they're in this position, they really want to do it the right way because they know that they've caused so much pain and heartache. And but it's very easy and often happens where they succumb to the temptation, and because they're seeing all this pain, and they are hopeful too that maybe this information will relieve some of that pain for them.
And I think that if we're fortunate enough to get to help people at the beginning, and we can create a plan with them around, we're not saying you're not going to get the information. We're saying let's do it a way that's safer for you,
Right.
and that can satiate some of the anxiety and the trauma response from both, but particularly from the partner, who is worried that if they don't get answers and they don't do it now, they'll never get it. Right? That's anxiety feeding that kind of panic and that obsessive pursuit. If we can say we're going to get to that, we're going to help with that, we're going to facilitate that. We're not asking you to not get something that feels important to you. We're just asking to get it in a certain way. It really kind of can settle a little bit of that anxiety. And that's really what we're trying to do, is to try and shift you out of so much of that high-level crisis anxious response mode.
Right. Exactly. So if I'm a partner who's been betrayed in that way, and then I'm hearing somebody say, don't ask questions and just hold on to them for some ambiguous amount of time, I'm not really crazy about that idea.
You want to fire us.
Right.
Sure. Yeah.
So, and I think rightfully so.
Absolutely.
That's why we do something we call a therapeutic disclosure, and we've done a YouTube video on this, and you're more than welcome to watch it, or you can go to our website and go to the service that we do on that, and there's, I think, a blog that we've linked to that as well, to really try to help people understand, have some more reading material to understand what it is. But we encourage people to get those scheduled as soon as possible, because for that, to eliminate that ambiguity factor, we don't want you to live in ambiguity of when am I going to be get to have these questions answered.
Right.
We're going to get that scheduled, and that will often help people, not succumb to the temptation of either asking the questions or having an early disclosure.
Right.
Because they know it's on the books. They know it's going to happen in here in the process that we do called a therapeutic disclosure.
Right.
So let's talk about that.
Okay. Well, the therapeutic disclosure, we've kind of alluded to some of the steps. From a practical perspective, what we like to do is to have both members of the couple meet with an individual therapist and prepare for disclosure. For the betrayed partner, they are writing down and evaluating, going through their questions that they have, the questions that they feel like they need answers to. They need the disclosure. Those questions, it's a therapeutic process to get those questions with your therapist. I always start telling my clients to write down everything. Just write it all down, right? Then we're going to bring it into therapy, and we're going to pair out the questions, and we're going to identify which questions are appropriate for therapeutic disclosure. and which questions will be answered in couples therapy. Therapeutic disclosure is a fact-based experience. This is kind of like Josh said, the house of cards falls, and disclosure is clearing off the debris to begin to build again. And so we can't, be talking about what the chimney is going to look like if we haven't even cleared out the foundation. And so the facts of what happened are what disclosure is about. So those questions by the partner get pared down to those fact questions.
Right.
Where, what time, when was that, how did, where was I at that time? Those are the questions. The questions that are for couples therapy are the why questions. Why did you do it? How could you do this to me? What did that mean to you? Those are very, very important questions.
Right.
They are completely normal, typical, and I would even say you have every right. They're just not questions you're going to get a good answer to at that point in therapy.
Right.
I always tell my clients that's later on.
Yeah.
Right? If you want a good answer, and you deserve a good answer based on everything you're going through, let's put them over here, but we will get to them.
Yeah.
So the work for that partner in their sessions is to go through those questions, pull out the fact questions, and place the ones for couples therapy, and we'll get to those.
Right. And so we have a process for that too. Like there are certain other things that we do with the couple to get to some of the more emotional questions,
Absolutely.
like why did this happen?
Sure.
So there's kind of two camps with that, by the way. There's what happened, how did this happen? That's one, and then there's the why did it happen, and that's the more emotional question. The what happened is just more of trying to just make sense of a mess.
Right.
And why did it happen is that really injured emotional part. But so partners kind of have both of those battling.
They are, yeah.
What we would venture to say is that we got to get to the what happened or how did it happen thing first. Really, it's really what happened. How did it happen comes later. But the reason why that's important is because that's the question that makes the partner feel unsafe.
Right.
Why did you do this to me is the question that comes from feeling unsafe, right? The emotional question. But to get to that, we got to address that first. That's why in the disclosure, we keep it fact-based. This disclosure is, when I'm prepping the unfaithful partner in what we call a disclosure statement, it's, the point is to let this person know what you are up to, what you've been doing, with the appropriate amount of detail in it to satisfy what we would consider to be defined, or how you might define honesty or transparency. Right.
Yeah.
We're not going to put every single detail of what happened in there just because there are certain details that we would say, like if it doesn't have what I say a therapeutic value to it, then it not only is not really helpful, it could be harmful.
And I think that's when what we're talking about too is trying to mitigate the traumatic experiences of this. Lots of clients come in and tell us that they know specific details, and now they really struggle with those details, right? So if you find out that something happened at a certain location and you can't go to that location, right? Or it happened on a certain date and now that date is devastating.
Right.
Trying to really evaluate as prep work before the actual sharing of the disclosure statement. What questions are you asking, and what would it mean to you if you knew the answer to that? That's what we're doing. And some clients, I always tell my clients there's a scale. There's some people that are on the lower end. They need the very basics of who, what, where, and when. There are some clients that need much more detail around who, what, where, and when.
Yeah.
My job is not to tell you what to do. My job is to help you evaluate who you are and what's going to give you the most peace of mind.
Right.
With the reality that there's no certainty in this world now. It's some version of peace and living with some amount of uncertainty as well.
Exactly. And I'm glad you said that too, because we're not saying that we wouldn't put those details in there. We're just saying that that's why we have to do the prep work. So there is some prep that goes into this before we actually do the actual event that we call a therapeutic disclosure, which is basically where Carrie and I or another therapist, it's two therapists in the couple that will meet together to do this 2-hour event where the disclosure statement's read, the partner asks the questions, and there's some debriefing time and some more couple time. There's a whole process that we have that we do this. But one of the questions that I think it's often asked of me by the unfaithful partners is, how is this going to help? You know, and do you get that question too? From...
I don't get it as much from the partners because they know it will help.
Right. Yeah.
And they're not doing it to help the person who has, you know, kept the secrets. They're doing it because they need to know. So I do think it's probably something that you hear more often.
Yeah. But it's interesting you said that, because it's almost like they're operating on two ends of two extremes of a continuum. Because if anything, I would say partners they're never going to walk out of after a disclosure feeling completely satisfied, like, oh, I just got all this information, now everything's okay.
Right.
You know, but that's also not the point of it. So I do think that there's this, you know, they're more hopeful in that sense, where they understand the need for it more. I also feel like that they could experience a little more disappointment emotionally in that it just didn't magically take away the pain.
Right.
The other side, the partners that have committed the acts of infidelity, they are going like, I got to go, you know, even if nothing else has happened, I've got to go relive this and disclose this all over this. I've already hurt this person enough. Like, they're really wanting some reassurance that this is going to be helpful, because why would I put them through this all over again?
Right.
You know, and so what I talk to them about is that, you know, this is not something that we just created out of nowhere. I mean, this comes from, you know, lots of research and practice from Patrick Carnes, basically, is the one that developed it. And we've been trained in it, and we've been doing it for years here. But at the same time, there's no guarantee that's not that a partner doesn't hear new information and go ahead and decide to end that relationship. There's no guarantee of that.
Right.
So when I talk to the partners, the unfaithful partners, about is that you got to feel good about what you're doing. Like, you've got, if you're wanting to be someone of integrity, honesty, transparency, and that's the foundation you want to build your relationship on, then, you know, that's what this is about. So despite what happens relationally, you need to feel good about the work that you did in the preparation for this, and what you're doing in effort to actually try to heal this injury that you caused. You know, so
it you know, I think going into it the way you're describing it is part of our job to help people have realistic expectations, but there's also just this human element of striving to do what's right. Because the right thing to do is always the right thing to do, and so the right thing to do to be healthy is to not keep secrets, and to rid yourself of that poison and those toxins that really do make you sick. And even if no one ever finds out, you live with that, and it's an injury to self. And so I think when we talk about advocating for just mental health in general, you're right, it's a risk that if you disclose to your partner secrets that are kept, that the relationship is over, or that they're too hurt to ever feel safe with you. But it's still operating towards health and hope to still let those secrets, you know, be shown the light of day.
Yeah, exactly. And I think a good place to a message to end on is something that you said earlier about clearing the foundation. And that's how we see the purpose of a therapeutic disclosure, is that if this relationship is over, the way I say it is that when you found out about when you discovered the infidelity, your relationship died that day. Your marriage died that day. You know, and this is about clearing the foundation out and rebuilding on the foundation. And that's the question that's really presented to the couple, is, you know, accepting the loss of this marriage and deciding if they want to build a new one together. And we're going to clear that foundation, repair any, you know, cracks or deficits that exist there, and then build on it. And so sometimes for the first time, maybe in their relationship, after the disclosure, there are no more secrets.
Right.
You know, and that's something that they potentially can build on
Right.
from that point forward. We don't want secrets to get a foothold anymore
Right.
in this couple's life.
That's right.
You know, so we could talk about this
We could keep going.
forever,
Right.
and so, but we've spent, I think we've spent a good 30 minutes talking about it. So if you have questions, like I said, about disclosure, what it means or what it involves, please, again, go check out our website, FamilySolutionsOK.com, and find our blog. And there's a good blog that we wrote about therapeutic disclosures. We have also a YouTube video that we made on it, so you can watch that as well. But you also are welcome to email us or call up here at the office or whatever. We are here to help inform you and answer those questions.
Right.
You know, so.
Right.
So we appreciate you guys being here, and we'll see you back next time.
Thank you.